Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I thought after reading the survey, the post-annual meeting survey, as we get every year, that it'd be probably a good idea to host an informational forum, very informal, about the annual meeting, how it's planned, why we do things the way we do them, especially financially. Just to kind of quell some myths and perhaps provide some insight and transparency into how that works. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of y'all out there member-wise that have served on other organizations planning committees. So, y'all might have ideas that we don't. So after hearing this, if you have any ideas or other ways of thinking, I'd appreciate any kind of input that you might have. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And of course, there we go. So today we have 8 panelists with us to help out. The way this will be structured is I will review, go over some slides and some information, and I'll open up to our panelists to chime in, all of whom have extensive history hosting SSA annual meetings. To start off with, we have Daniel Alonso. He served as president of SSA from 2021 to 2022. He's immediate past president right now. His first volunteer position was on the Austin 2013 LAC as transportation coordinator for repository tours and the AV coordinator. He served on the San Antonio 2018 program committee and as the program chair for Baton Rouge, which was a virtual annual meeting in 2021. He's presented at various SSA annual meetings and performed work as assigned at various other times, including a brief stint as SSA photographer from 2018 to 2019. And he's currently an archivist at the Texas General Land Office in Austin, Texas. We have Edward Benoit III, who is associate director and associate professor in the School of Library and Information Science at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. He's the coordinator of the Archival Studies and Cultural Heritage Resource Management programs. He received an MA in History, an MLIS, and PhD in Information Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. His research focuses on participatory and community archives, non-traditional archival materials, climate change, and archival education. He's the founder and director of the Virtual Footlocker Project, which examines the personal archiving habits of the 21st century soldier in an effort to develop new digital capture and preservation technologies to support their needs. He was the chair of the 2021 SSA LAC and has previously chaired multiple conference planning committees. Jennifer Green is currently the records management specialist at the Oklahoma State Archives, serving in an advisory and educational role. Jennifer works with state agencies to establish and maintain best practices for records and information management. In public service since 2007, Jennifer is dedicated to government transparency and access to public information. She's volunteered her time with SSA as secretary from 2011 to 2015 and president from 2017 to 2018. She's also served as chair of the Local Arrangements Committee in 2016. Currently, she's serving as president of the National Association of Government Archives and Records Administrators. We have Nori Guthrie. She's archivist and special collections librarian at the Woodson Research Center at the Fondren Library at Rice University in Houston. While she does a bit of everything in the department, she specializes in collecting and processing music materials from the Houston Folk Music Archive and Houston Blues Museum Archive. She served as LAC co-chair this past year in Houston for the 2022 annual meeting. Next, we have Mike Miller, who is the executive director of the Rosenberg Library and Museum in Galveston, Texas. He has served SSA in many capacities throughout the years, including serving as the LAC co-chair for the 2013 conference in Austin. He was treasurer of SSA for quite some time. And in addition, he has served on LACs for Nagara and TSHA conferences. Tracy Patterson is also an archivist and special collections librarian at the Woodson Research Center at Rice University and the Fondren Library. She works primarily with materials from the Houston Jewish History Archive, and she was co-chair of the SSA Local Arrangements Committee for the 2022 meeting this past year in Houston. Next, we have Alexis Paragoy. She has 12 years experience working in archives and museums and is currently the director of the Coit Museum of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, I believe at the University of Arizona. Previously, she worked as the archivist for technical services at the Center for Creative Photography at the same location and as a processing archivist at Washington University in St. Louis. Alexis has been involved with SAA since 2016, having served 4 years on the executive board and as the chair of the Local Arrangements Committee for the SAA SEMA joint annual meeting held in Tucson, Arizona in 2019. And of course, last but not least, we have Jerry Ann Schad. Jerry currently works at Florida Southern College in Lakeland, Florida. She was treasurer from SSA from 2005 to 2011 and worked with every local arrangements committee to provide funding and give advice on hotel contracts and budgeting. She's kind of the informal LAC guru for SSA and gives her own time very freely and generously to help people out with planning. She worked on the site selection committee from 1998 till 2004. And in 2004, she was the chair of the local arrangements committee in San Antonio. So during this meeting, I'll review, or during this forum, I'll review site selection process, how that works, annual meeting planning in general, and the local arrangements committee and their impact on annual meeting planning. Of course, annual meeting expenditures, what we plan for, what we spend, and how we organize all that. And then at the end, we'll have Q&A and open it up, hopefully 15 minutes for the attendees to ask questions. Just a moment. I am going to multitask and let people into the room. Okay. So site selection. The site selection committee solicits proposals from SSA members to submit to host the annual meeting. So this is more or less a very brief proposal. There are parameters that are laid out in the annual meeting guide of what's expected. The executive board assists in reviewing the proposals to select and approve a site. The parameters used to evaluate the proposals include what the city can offer our members. For example, does the city have hotel and or convention facilities available? We want to look at size here because SSA is in this weird niche where we're too small for larger convention centers and hotels, but too big for the smaller boutique hotels. So we kind of have to find the right Goldilocks range for us. And also whether or not the room capacity is there, not just session rooms, but the room blocks for our attendees to stay. Is the location near a facility is the facility near local attractions? So we want to make sure that our attendees are open to attending so that they could perhaps participate in other area things. Are there restaurants within walking distance? Can we make it, this a fun event for them as well outside of the annual meeting and allow them ways to explore the city? So we want to attract people to come to the annual meeting, and the local attractions usually help with that. Is there a major airport nearby? And if not, what kind of transportation can be used? So in the age of Uber and Lyft, it's become a little easier for people to get from airports to hotels. However, that does factor into a lot of people's budgets about whether or not to attend a conference. So we want to look at whether the host hotel has shuttles, if people can easily make it fairly inexpensively from the hotel to from the airport to the hotel and vice versa. We want to look at what activities we can schedule outside the meeting. So these aren't mandatory for every meeting, but it's kind of been a trend, and not kind of, it's been a trend that we have repository tours that are, and so we want to make sure those are easily accessible. Buses do cost quite a bit of money. So we want to make sure that if we do have repository tours, the means of getting there is can be easily done. Can we use one shuttle to get to 2 locations, for example, that kind of thing to alleviate costs? What kind of local arrangements support can you garner from the area? So is there a chamber of commerce that can offer us bags or tote bags, or is there a sponsor that can offer us in-kind support for lanyards? Are there sponsors that can help us out financially? And then, we can highlight them and market, whatever they have in response for the funding that they're giving us. Seeking out this information in advance is helpful. It's not necessary for the proposal, but just being able to say, we've looked at these points and this is what we can say we can offer in the proposal will help to make it more robust and more persuasive. Financially, the annual meeting is never meant to make a profit. It's intended to break even. And I think that's been kind of a misconception over the years, is that for people who aren't on the planning committee or on the annual meeting, on a local arrangements committee, that if you don't have that experience, you don't realize that SSA does not make a profit from this. We try to make it as inexpensive as possible for our members, and the goal is to break even. So we want to make sure that we can negotiate with the hotels to be able to do that as well. We do ask that people submit proposals to the site selection committee at least 2 years in advance. They can be sent out as early as 3 years out. 2018 in San Antonio, we did that because we were very nervous about the Spurs, who were doing really well at the time, and we knew with basketball season we'd be competing with them. So you want to look at any kind of outside influences like that can inform the success of hosting the annual meeting in your city. The executive board does need to approve the proposal at least 15 months out before the annual meeting year. There's precedence for submissions being submitted and approved further out than that, as I just stated, again, for anything local. So I've got one more site selection slide. In the past, annual meetings have been held as early as April and as late as June. We usually try to aim for that 3-month window. We often compete with high school and college graduations, which can be kind of a bummer. But we do have to work with the hotel's availability, which can often dictate when the annual meeting is scheduled, since we have to work with their pricing and their availability, not to mention, like I just said, local events such as sporting events, festivals, anything else that might be happening locally. Since hotel negotiations usually don't occur until after the proposals are approved, they are not expected to be included in the proposals themselves. That said, once the proposal is approved, the local arrangements committee chairs or chair are expected to provide a theme and dates. The theme is also kind of well, we can go into that later, but there's not a theme isn't necessary, but it does help out the program committee in submitting a call for session proposals. And it helps bring up some hype at the Saturday morning business meeting the year before that they host their annual meeting. So, you know, you want to drum up some excitement at that Saturday business meeting. So having a theme and some dates will help do that. There's been some flexibility in the past about people not having a theme in time for the Saturday morning business meeting or times, but just being able to create a slideshow or do something to drum up some excitement would be very helpful. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up to our panelists and try and see who would like to chime in. Guess you can raise your hands or unmute yourselves, panelists, if you have anything to contribute regarding site selection.
I will just say one thing. So with the Baton Rouge, it did start out, you know, it was supposed to be in person. So we did go through all of this before eventually switching to virtual. And one of the things that we really considered as far as the possible hotels, there are two sections really in Baton Rouge. There's downtown, which looks nice, but nobody's ever there. Or there's the more suburb looking part, which also has hotels, but it's not near any of the repositories. So it was one of those, okay, do we want to be closer to the repository so people could just walk there, or more out in the boonies, but it's cheaper? And so it's something you might want to consider as far as location of, oh, are we near a university? Are we not? Bigger cities obviously have more choice, but something that we had to consider. And then we went online, so it didn't matter.
I'll say that we had the same issue in Houston, that it ended up that we had 3 location choices, one being downtown, the other one being the medical center, and the third being the Galleria. And so the medical center would have been convenient for repositories, but I think that the medical center hospital is probably not the vibe that you want for an archives conference. And especially considering that we did end up having our thing during COVID, it would not have been great. And then downtown, you know, may not be as awesome at times, and it did add to expense, but then the Galleria was like totally not a feasible option if you ever wanted to leave the Galleria area. So it is, you know, it is interesting to kind of think about, you think that you might have a lot of options, but then you have to really like kind of think like, what is the best area and what hotels are really available for us.
I was about to say something about Arlington and how Arlington was also a little bit of a desert. It is, it does boast as the largest city in the US without public transportation. So it was very difficult for people to get around. I remember a lot of ride sharing and people carpooling to take people to certain places to do things. So you just want to think about accessibility as well when planning for these things. Did anybody else have any other panelists have any other comments regarding site selection? I will say,
Mike
go
Miller
ahead.
had his hand raised before.
oh, okay.
He got to
Did he-
speak.
Did he make it here? There he is.
There he is.
Yeah, I was just gonna reiterate what you said on one of your slides, Melissa, about you don't have to have it all figured out when you submit it. I was remembering in Austin, we were reviewing hotel options, and I think we were probably a year after we were selected before we even decided on what hotel we wanted to go with. So don't feel like you have to have it all done before you submit. You can submit based on an idea.
And if I remember from reading the annual meeting guide, you don't even have to have a LAC arranged yet, or even co-chairs or chairs arranged yet. I mean, usually the people who draft the proposal end up becoming the chairs or the co-chairs. And in the past 10 years, I think there've been a lot of co-chair setups. I think it helps people to know that they've got some support on that level when doing that. So, and we were also talking briefly before we started that in the past, we've also kind of rotated between 1 year in Texas, 1 year outside of Texas. And Jerry did clarify that it was supposed to be central, which can include Oklahoma, and people are on the fence about Arkansas being central or east. But yes, so we usually try to go 1 year in, 1 year out of the central area. And just to kind of help some people who live more west can't always travel more east and vice versa. So it helps to have some years rotate like that so that people can attend more often due to their financial restraints or whatever they have going on scheduling wise. But I think if nobody else has anything else to say about that, we can move forward.
Actually, Jennifer and I do.
Sure.
I'm going to say that probably one of the big things is, are there places to walk to for food? You can be anywhere and get bused to someplace, but people leaving the hotel, food, walking, safety, those are issues to consider.
And Jen, your hand's raised.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jerry. And I was also thinking about what Ed was saying regarding location in your city, that it is true, you can get bused anywhere, but buses are really expensive. And so if you're considering hotels and one might be more expensive than another and be more walkable, it's probably worth it to invest in that walkable location than say, oh, we'll just get buses, because they end up costing a lot more than you ever imagined a bus could cost. So that's just, it's not always clear in the beginning of those cost differences, but the walkability, I'll just back up Jerry and say that's really important for sure.
Thank you. No, I don't see any other hands raised, so I will move forward. Local Arrangements Committee. So the function of the LAC is to plan, prepare, and provide the local services to conduct the annual meeting. So they're the ones that get all this rolling and do all the planning. They select the meeting location. They negotiate the contract with the hotel or for the meeting rooms and the reservation of hotel room blocks, which the annual meeting guide goes into more detail about. They arrange for any receptions, tours, transportation, and publicity. The LAC can also establish a theme, like I said earlier, relating to a trend or an issue in the archival profession, or a local event or a historical topic. We had the 50th anniversary this past year. It was in Houston. It was space themed, but it's not a requirement. Again, it's not a requirement, but it does help out with program committee and drumming up some excitement. Again, the goal is not to raise money for SSA, but to provide a stimulating, educational, professional, and social event that's affordable to as many members as possible. A lot of people can't afford to attend national conferences, but they can afford to usually attend our regional. And we want to make sure we can make it as affordable as possible for everyone. The LAC works closely with the annual meeting program committee, which is chaired by the current year's vice president. This year it's Nori Guthrie. And they coordinate the content of the educational sessions by organizing a committee, other people on the committee to work with them, sending out a call for proposals, reviewing and selecting sessions. And then they collaborate with the LAC to schedule them in the meeting rooms that have been arranged in the hotel. And so that usually dictates the schedule as well, how many sessions we're able to have, how many rooms. We usually have about 3 sessions per room at any given time slot. But again, there's no right or wrong way of doing that. So it's completely up to the program committee chair and the LAC to organize that how they see fit. They also work with the professional development committee, which is responsible for arranging the pre-conference education in the form of workshops or webinars. Again, there's an annual meeting guide that describes all of this more thoroughly. It even provides a timeline for project management, which can help out considerably. And again, and in some years, I will say that I've been on some local arrangements committees. Those timelines aren't always perfectly done. Like, you don't always stick to it the way you should, and that's okay. You want to be flexible and want to take some breathers and just kind of some self-care throughout all of that, so that you're not freaking out too much, because it will all get done and it'll be fine and you have help. The SSA treasurer can also provide more information to the LAC chairs and co-chairs regarding previous meetings for planning, so that you can establish budgets and hotel room blocks that fit your specific area. So in other words, if you're in Santa Fe, you don't want to use Houston's because the size difference of the city there is considerably different. You're not probably going to get as many attendees as you would at a larger city. And so that's, you kind of want to look at a comparable city in the past to kind of establish your budgets. Do we have any panelist expertise comments regarding anything I just said? I have one more LAC slide, but I don't see any raised hands.
Just that you can have access to the contracts from past meetings to see that, right?
Yes. Yes. I will say that I'd like to create a centralized area where at least leadership can access those more easily, because in the past, I think it's been contacting the individual chairs and co-chairs to try and grab that information. I've had people reach out to me to ask me for the San Antonio information. So it would be nice to gather all of that in one space, so that we either the site selection committee or anybody who's on leadership can provide that information to somebody who asks for it. But yes, it is available.
It really should be available in the archives, but
Yes.
nowadays it should be in a shared document. I mean, you can go back and see what happened in a previous, we've been in Albuquerque a couple of times, and you can see what costs were there and who they worked with, and hotels. Somebody in the chat mentioned Fort Worth, and what time of year, all of that information, who, how was the thing arranged, who were speakers. It's there. We're archivists, for God's sakes, people.
Yes. Yes, we should have our information in a place where everybody can see it. And if anything, I hate to say it, but the board meeting minutes also have all of that documented. So it's a matter of reading through all of that to see how things were presented and reports that the LACs gave, to kind of get an idea of other information. Anything else? Also, I can't see the chat from my perspective. So if somebody wants to raise a hand and remind me of something to touch up on during my speaking, that would be great. Again, goal is not to raise money. Sorry, I forgot to put that animation in. Wasn't that fancy? Okay. So yeah, the chair and the co-chairs are appointed by the SSA president. Usually after, well, obviously after submitting the proposal and after it's been selected, put their names forth, the board approves them or the president approves them. And then they get started. And one of the first things the chairs and co-chairs do is usually solidifying and the hotel and getting the hotel room, the contract in place. And then also appointing people to serve on the committee. Since it's often hard or difficult to appoint people to each role, a lot of people will multitask and serve and do multiple roles. When I was chair of co-chair of the 2018 annual meeting, I was also the exhibitor, vendor, and sponsorships coordinator. So it just depends. Each one's different. So it helps to have somebody fulfilling those roles, but it might be one person handling more than one. So for example, the roles include chair and co-chair, treasurer, and the treasurer is only handling the funds and finances for the local arrangements committee, not for SSA in general. We have a treasurer for that. Computer and AV equipment coordinator. So that's going to be the person who handles any tech within the hotel themselves. They're going to be dealing with a hotel or convention center's AV company, which is usually a third-party company. It's not the hotel. They're usually contractors that the hotel uses, and so you'll work with them separately. And those prices have to be negotiated as well. Facilities and catering coordinator. In the past, I've usually seen the chairs and co-chairs handle that, but if you want to have somebody who's doing solely that, they can do that as well. Registration manager. So that's the person in charge of setting up the registration page on the SSA site, website, and managing those registrations, answering questions, making sure that we have gratis registration set up for sponsorship winners or scholarship winners and others. Then of course you've got the social events, transportation, and tours planner. That person usually also deals with finding and locating repositories, setting up bus tours if we need to do that. Exhibitor, vendor, and sponsorships coordinator. I would say this position is extremely important next to the chairs and co-chairs because they are responsible for making sure that we are bringing money into the annual meeting. I'll go into that a little bit more detail in a bit, but we want to subsidize as much money as we can to make sure that we are alleviating costs for the members to attend. We have the SLOTO coordinator. They work with the awards committee chair. And for people who don't know what SLOTO is, I believe it's scholarships lottery. At least that's what I've been saying for the last I don't know how many years. And that's the fundraiser that we do after the Saturday morning business meeting to raise money for scholarships. We have the publicity coordinator to do outreach, often work with the Internet Outreach Committee. And again, the treasurer for the LAC will often work with the treasurer for SSA. There's some partnerships that usually are engaged between SSA leadership as well throughout the process. The program committee chair and the PDC chair serve as ex officio members to the LAC to ensure continuity and consistency. Some regions are able to host joint annual meetings with regional organizations in their area. For example, in the past, Louisiana has hosted joint meetings with the Louisiana Archives and Manuscripts Association, or LAMA, and Arizona has done the same with the Conference of Intermountain Archivists. And those types of arrangements can, lend themselves to different types of planning. I'm not sure if the annual meeting guide touches on that. I'm sure one of the panelists could probably tell me that, set me straight on that, but you're going to be dealing with you're going to have to make sure that you're incorporating people from those regionals into your local arrangements committee to make sure you're all planning everything consistently. So that can create another host of issues or no issues, perhaps, because you've got more people to work from and more people to assign tasks. So at the end of this slide, I will open it up now to panelists. If you'd like to raise your hands or just chime in and unmute, or unmute and chime in. I think that's the order.
Yeah, I mean, some places are small and they don't necessarily have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people who can serve. So, if you can get somebody, who can help out for a couple of months, or they can't start at the very beginning, but they certainly can help with tours planning towards the end. You're looking at local arrangements that could be in place for 18 months to 2 years, and not everybody can commit to that time. So people can do multiple roles. You can, cater the meeting to your circumstances where you're at. When I did in San Antonio, I had people from the library helping out. My registration was done by non-archivist people. So consider that too.
And some of these can be done remotely during the planning part, and then the person's on site during the meeting, hopefully, like Slotto can be coordinated by somebody entirely elsewhere, for example.
Yeah, especially nowadays where Zoom is possible and other things. I know I jumped on some Zoom calls with Lauren and Dubois this past year about Slotto and some other things. So people who have served in those positions before, I think, have been very amenable in the past to helping out. And answering some questions. But yes, I think it helps to be able to establish a virtual component, if at all possible. Any other raised hands? Alexis, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're the last person I remember hosting a joint annual meeting. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so with that, we kind of joined with SEMA a little bit late. I can't remember exactly how far we were into planning. And then SEMA approached us about a joint annual meeting. So we were able to figure it out, but I would recommend that if you want to do a joint with another organization, that you start that investigating and communication early on, and then making sure that the budget should be extremely clear on who is kind of managing what. For us, it really was SSA that took on everything, and SEMA had kind of bare minimum responsibility since they kind of joined in late. Like, we already had everything figured out. We did have a representative from SEMA, I think a couple of them, so that helped to make sure that all of their different award ceremonies and events that they tend to do were included in the schedule. But it's definitely a lot of just communicating, making sure that representatives are always present at each meeting. And then the budget thing is the biggest piece.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any other insights? Okay. All right. Next slide. So annual meeting expenditures. So the LAC does receive startup funds. I believe it's around $1,000 if I remember correctly. But they do rely on the registration fees, exhibitor fees, and sponsorship monies to fund the annual meeting and keep costs down for members. I think I brushed up on that briefly. Costs for the annual meeting include hotel and convention center rentals. There will be charges for meeting space, exhibitor halls, catering, again, AV rental, and internet access. And of course, with all of this, any applicable taxes, gratuities, and service charges. So a lot of people tend to forget those last three, and that can be tacked on and increase the costs. I wouldn't say exponentially, but there's quite a bit of a difference. Now the meeting room blocks, I think a lot of people also always think, well, the hotels are so expensive, and we do try to negotiate as much as we can to keep them reasonable, and with the understanding that people do share and double up on rooms to alleviate costs. But meeting those hotel room blocks is what keeps us from paying for the meeting session rooms. So if we meet those blocks, we get concessions, and one of those concessions is discounted, or some of the concessions can include discounted parking rates, can include like I said, the session rooms are waived. The exhibitor hall spaces are waived. That's usually why we also are able to do the welcome reception in the hotels, so that we can meet the food and catering minimums, because we are required to meet a minimum of food and catering to alleviate, to not have to pay for those spaces as well. We try to save costs by bringing our own laptops. They will charge us for everything as far as AV and tech go. So if you ever wondered why there's only one mic on a session table, it's because they charge us per mic. So I don't know, maybe that's something we need to invest in as an organization, and buying our own mics so that we can bring them to the sessions ourselves and cut down on costs that way, because I did notice this past year it was a little difficult to pass the mic around between panelists during the Q&A sessions. But anyway, we do bring our own laptops, and in some cases, I don't think we've ever bought projectors, but I won't say that that's never been done in the past before. So yes, off-site venue rentals for social events. You also have to take into account catering for those spaces, group transportation and entertainment, and again, taxes, gratuities, and service charges for those spaces too. It helps if you can have the hotel host a reception, because that helps us meet our minimum catering budgets and goals, and keep costs down. In some cases, you can have a local sponsor host a reception by offering it as an in-kind donation. We were really lucky in San Antonio to have the Whitty Museum and the Alamo, both, or the General Land Office, both as in-kind sponsorships waive the cost of renting both spaces. This past year with the research center at the HMRC in Houston, we were able to also get an in-kind sponsorship for that. That helps us out tremendously because those rental fees can be astronomical. You also have to keep in mind that if there's alcohol, we have to pay for a police officer to be on site. That's another fee. When negotiating or looking for these reception sites, see if they can let you bring in your own alcohol. It's usually a lot cheaper to hit Costco and buy beer and wine, or again, find a local brewery or space that can offer in-kind donations of liquor, which were able to have also in San Antonio. And then the caterer was able to use that liquor in the drinks that they made for us. So it was very helpful to be able to do that. So there are ways to cut costs, thinking a little bit outside the box and not being afraid to ask for things. I think asking for money and in-kind sponsorships is probably one of the most difficult things to do. So if you have somebody with no shame who's the sponsorship coordinator, then that's even better, or is just really good at it, that's even bestest. But yes, raising money for this to help lower registration costs and other fees and provide more food. We know everybody wants coffee all the time at the sessions. We know we need more food. And again, it comes down to cost and what we can afford. Other costs that people don't even think about: program printing. Lately, we've been going to printable PDFs and asking people to print those out on their own if they'd like, to save costs there. In many cases, I know that people have used in-kind donations from their institutions to print things out without their institutions knowing. But that's between you and your institution and in your ethics, I guess. Mobile apps for programs can incur additional costs also. So we haven't even, I don't think we've even explored that yet. Maybe some LACs have, in creating a mobile app for the program. Supplies, name tags, badges, directional signage at the conference site. Honorariums for the plenary speakers and for the professional development committee, for instructors for workshops and webinars, and even event insurance. The hotel does require that we have that in most cases. And again, it's not expected to have everything hosted by the hotel. It does help cut down on costs, but in the past we've had sessions and receptions held at convention centers, and then room blocks in hotels that are nearby within walking distance or easily accessible. So if you do plan on hosting a meeting and want to do that split, just keep in mind that you have to look at the travel between the two spaces as well. Is there anything else anybody would like to chime in about that I didn't cover or would like to expand upon? Panelists?
There are some things in the chat about it.
I cannot see the chat, so if I open the chat, I stop sharing because this is weird.
We were mainly talking about AV and hotels. Some hotels allow you to bring it in, some hotels don't. It's probably size of the hotel. And so if you're in a smaller place, you might be able to bring more things in and lower your costs.
I will say that this past year, that Portia and the current LAC, we're looking at the convention center that they were looking at hosting the event, which is now going to be, I think, hosting a reception instead, had these devices called owls, which are streaming cameras. We use them at my place of business, and they're kind of amazing. They're really fairly low cost regarding tech. I mean, considering the kind of tech that they are and what they can do and what they're capable of. But you plop it in the middle of a room, it knows to focus on the front, and then it also kind of circles around the room itself and can focus on who's speaking at the time, and then they record and they stream. And so we're looking at perhaps purchasing those in the future to bring with us to hotels to be able to provide streaming during the event. So that's something we're looking at this year too. Jen, I thought about you because I'm trying to remember if Oklahoma City was the last place that we had it at a hotel and a convention center and not just in the hotel.
Oh, I think it was, because yeah, we did have ours in a hotel that was adjoined to the convention center. We have a new convention center now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, since then.
That one was huge.
Yes, it is not that anymore, but yeah, that is true. We did do that. I think the university partnership is so wonderful and such a great resource. And isn't that what's happening with Albuquerque this year?
I believe so, yes.
I attended the COSA Best Practice Exchange, which was held at the State Archives, and we had a hotel nearby. And it was really nice because it freed you up from all of those hotel constraints, having it at the archives instead of in a hotel setting where they don't allow you to bring in your own food or your own AV or anything like that. So I think it's important to think creatively when you're looking at your city and, just try and think about what partnerships you could pull in. I think people were talking about breweries in the chat and using public transportation and those sorts of things. I think that can be a real asset to offsetting some of the cost and trouble if you look at the benefits of your city, and maybe talking with your tourism council or your chamber of commerce to see if they would donate transportation passes or anything. Tell them we're going to bring 300 people to town this day, and see what they might offer you as well. We did that a lot in Oklahoma City. We just went around and asked 1 million people for things because, the worst they can say is no, and then you're where you started out. So definitely don't be shy to ask for anything, because as a nonprofit educational organization, people are happy to help and support us.
It was a great meeting, and being able to leave the hotel was nice and forced you to get outside and walk around.
Well, and for professional development, if you can have, if a nearby university can offer site rooms or, where you can hold the professional development, that will cut down a little bit on computer costs and room rentals at the hotel.
Hmm. Nothing else to chime in. I will move forward. So historically, the registration fees for the meeting are set at a level sufficient to pay for the cost of the meeting. The registration fees are usually established after we know, what our budget looks like. At that point, we know how much we need to earn, how much we need to spend. And if we factor in X amount of people attending at X, we can usually figure out how much per person we would need to bring in to cut the cost to break even, but also to see where else we need to raise more money or to bring in more money to cut costs to keep registration fees down. Again, the exhibitor fees and sponsor money subsidizes those costs, which and keeps the registration fees down. The LAC is provided again with initial startup money, but the registration fees, the exhibitor fees, and the sponsorship monies, that's really what pays for the conference itself. Exhibitors must pay for their own transportation and hotel. SSA never pays for this. These exhibitors are using this as an opportunity to promote their product and to network. And so they put this money forward. I mean, this is their job, is to travel to all these conferences and do these things. So there were some comments in the post-annual meeting survey this past year where people, say, well, why is SSA paying for exhibitors to be here? And it's like, we don't pay for them to be here. They pay us. And in many cases, they, I think someone is unmuted. Please mute if you can. Thank you. I can't tell who it is. Anyway, so yes, exhibitors are often also sponsors. So there is a sponsorship tier. Usually it's like bronze, silver, gold, platinum. Each tier is a certain amount of money and includes some, comped registrations, half-day registrations. They get marketing in the program online. We promote them on site during the meeting, either through signage or through promoting them before speaking, during the keynotes or at the business meeting. And so the annual meeting guide does have examples of those tiers and what that form should look like. And so this is why we always encourage people to walk through the exhibitor hall. When you're planning the annual meeting, make sure you put the exhibit hall in a space where where foot traffic is encouraged, either getting from point A to point B. People walk through the exhibit hall. That helps bring in foot traffic. We try to arrange for some meet and greets with coffee and food to get people to go into the exhibit hall. Again, this is just because we want the exhibitors to see that this is worth their while and worth their investment. Because again, those funds are what help make this possible. So we don't want to lose exhibitors. We don't want them to say like, well, it really wasn't worth the effort or the costs to attend last year. So I think we're going to forego this year. That's kind of, you want to avoid that as much as possible. And think of outside the box too for exhibitors. Bring in some local people. There were a few preservation and people that we tried to bring in San Antonio that were regional but had never been to SSA before, and so they were very excited to be there and asked. I went to an ARMA Houston conference and was like, we have all these archives adjacent exhibitors and I've never seen them at SSA. So I just started grabbing business cards and talking to them and saying, hey, we've got this conference coming up. Would you like to? And they're like, yeah, send us some information. So just keeping an eye out when you're at other functions or perhaps, you're looking for tools at your own institution and you've identified some exhibitors you've never seen before at SSA. Keep those in mind, and if you're not on a LAC, send them to the current LAC and say, hey, these might be helpful, just so that we can, make sure that we're bringing in as much financial help as we can. But yes, that's one of the reasons and a very important aspect of the annual meeting. I'll open it up to the panelists. I see there's some comments in the chat that I cannot see. Ed, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just had two things. One, the tier names can also be somewhere where you can get a little creative. And maybe, of course, now I can't think of anything, but for Houston, it could have been astronaut themed or something. I don't know. Or Astros themed, maybe. But another thing that I never thought of until with our LAC, we were lucky enough to have a professional conference planner on it. And I've worked with her a few times now, and I didn't believe this would work, but it does. Limit the number of sponsors at the highest level, because it creates a sense of, oh, I got to get that level. There's only 2 available. And they tend to, every time I've done that now, we've hit both of them and they sell. So I think it's the marketing of scarcity. It's like
Yeah, I'll have to
QVC.
chime in and agree with you on that, Ed. That's absolutely a thing that Nagara has seen, where we only have a couple of spots for the highest level, and then they get like their table right by the door of the exhibitor room or whatever. They get a number of benefits for that level, obviously. But I totally, yes, that's a good
It's
call.
weird. Yeah, it is very QVC. There's only 15 left.
It works though. It works. But it's ingenious and it's so simple. And I would have never thought of that. But again, we're volunteers. We're all volunteers doing this. And this is why I've asked people who have done this many times and at many areas, many different organizations to come through and enlighten us with these types of businessy things that we don't often think of. So yes, bring whatever skill sets or knowledge that you have to this to help. Any other? I don't see any other hands raised. You know what? That highest sponsorship, if it's only going to be limited to 2, should have one of those SMU cat totes, because I think that'd be a huge selling point for those 2. I think they'd go really quickly. I'm just saying, just if you want to add that.
It could be named the Yellow Rose of Texas level.
Oh, she's not going anywhere for a little, but that's a whole nother thing. Anyway, any other things? I don't see anybody. Okay. So educational offerings. So as I said earlier, the sessions are selected and scheduled by the annual meeting program committee with the help of the PDC and the local arrangements committee. A member of the LAC will serve as on the program committee as a liaison in order to facilitate this partnership. They'll have insight as to what's going on with the LAC and that they could chime in during those meetings and provide some more information if needed. The program committee is responsible for putting out, again, the call for conference session proposals. Nori just put that out last month, I believe, if memory serves. I still think it's October and it's November. They select and they schedule the sessions and they provide the information that the LAC needs to produce the conference program itself. In our post-annual meeting surveys, we've received some complaints about the quality of the session content. I would like to remind everybody that you all have a say in that. We can only select from what we receive. So in 2022, for example, we had 18 session slots. We did not receive enough proposals. So the deadline was extended and we received just enough to have 3 sessions in each time slot. Again, that could be a result from the pandemic. So please be kind and remember that that people are still recovering from that. They might not want to travel to attend a conference, so they're not even submitting proposals to speak at this time because travel funds are also lower at this time. So there's a lot of factors going into people being able to attend conferences, which I think is also affecting the proposal submissions as well. We are also all volunteers again, so we're working with what we have. If there's a session you would like to see, please organize that, submit a proposal, and cold call colleagues. If you know somebody who's working at a repository that you know is doing similar work, or hit the leadership or the SSA. Oh my gosh, what's our listserv thing? We've got a thing on there. Put out a call and see if anybody wants to speak with you or is interested in speaking on a panel with you and submitting a proposal. If you're just a single person and you've got an idea and you want to put it out there, be flexible and say, hey, feel free to add me to another session if they need more people on there, because sometimes that does happen. Sessions are usually composed of 3 or more speakers. If it's a lightning round, there might be more. If you propose a session with 1 or 2 people, be prepared to have the program committee recommend that you be placed with another session. We don't do them with less than 3. I've never seen it done before. At that point, I think it's just a white paper and you're just presenting about that, and it's not so much of a panel or a session. We do require presenters to pay the registration fees, even if you are only attending for your 1 session. So please plan accordingly. In the past, it's been very difficult to offer the capability to stream in presenters from offsite due to the AV restrictions and fees that are set by the host hotel and the convention center. So, or a convention center. So those are things that we have to plan out way in advance when negotiating those AV contracts. That's why when you, and those are usually already pretty much nailed down by the time the program committee is reviewing proposals. So unless it's been advertised as a hybrid or streaming conference, do not assume that we will have the technology to be able to stream somebody in. I mean, I know it's easy now with Zoom and everything to be able to do it in a setting such as this and from your own home when you're working at your office, but when you start factoring the hotels, things start getting a little tricky. So just keep that in mind. There are current efforts, like I said earlier, to start streaming and providing a hybrid environment with the use of owls and other technology. The current LAC is planning on having a hybrid meeting this year. So I'm really looking forward to that. This is a test year for us. We're encountering an undiscovered country for SSA. So this will be really interesting, and I'm really excited to see what happens this year. Again, we're volunteers, we have limited funds, but we're trying to do things that we can to make these things possible. So because we know we want to increase accessibility so that people can attend these events. Any thoughts? Oh, there's lots in the chat, 22 chats that I cannot see. Can someone help facilitate for me?
Lots of links about proposals for this year
Oh,
and
wait.
discussions.
Oh, people want to, wait, what?
There's discussion about proposals.
People want to propose? Yes, we need someone for 2024. Please propose.
No.
If only it were that.
Not proposals for hosting, proposals for presenting.
Oh, okay, good. Yes.
Sorry for that.
No, but that's also good too. Yes.
I've been hyping.
I also, oh,
Who's this? Sorry. Raise a hand.
I started talking, but I thought I heard someone else. So I was seeing who else was saying. I specifically put on there about students, making sure that, especially where our local, where it's actually being held, the institutions that are there, because obviously the grad students and undergrad students would have to pay less to come to the conference. But if you're at an academic institution, like, tell your students about it. I'm the history liaison for UTA, so I blast my faculty members about all of the things. But yeah, I think that obviously getting them involved in these student proposals and getting them in for poster sessions and having them have experience coming to a conference like this is huge. And it was the things that I did when I was an undergrad. And so, you know, if you have access to the students in your area, let them know. Also, we have scholarship funding for students to come to the conference. So make sure that you're sending out that information to all of the people that you interact with at your institutions and your universities. So,
Excellent advice. This is SSA is a great size too for somebody who is a new professional or student to come in and network. And I did that as a grad student between my first and second years in Houston in 2009, and it was amazing. I met my future co-chair for the 2018 LAC at that meeting, and met a lot of great people. So it was a great way to network in a very informal and chill manner because SSAers are amazing. Any other input? Thank you, Whitney. That was awesome. Yes, students, please promote.
Did we talk about pre-conference workshops? You could invite in SAA, or, you know, they could bring a workshop and that can make it easy. And sometimes we have tarot workshops they're kind of Texas focused, but it's also XML skills that anybody could benefit from.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, so the PDC, the Professional Development Committee, does bring in SAA instructors to help bring in DAX courses, not DAX. Oh my gosh. What's the digital?
DAS, digital asset. or-
Thank you, DOS, to bring in DOS courses that are easier for people to access, since you're already going to be at the conference. You can attend one of those. We've done some DEIA workshops in the past, and in that case, in one case, I think in San Antonio, we did bring Sam Wynn in, who was from outside of the region. Feel free to, if you have any ideas, send them to the PDC. If you've attended something that looks amazing that you think would be a great pre-conference workshop or webinar, send that to the PDC and see if we can arrange to get that on our schedule, on our program.
Oh, Melissa, how do you reach the PDC?
That's a good question. I have that on my next slide. Oh, I believe, no. First, things to keep in mind, there is help. I've been mentioning this entire time that there is an annual meeting guide. There are previous chairs and co-chairs. I think all our bandwidths are pretty stretched out right now, but as far as I've seen, everybody's been very kind and very willing to answer emails or answer questions over email. I've jumped on some Zoom calls with people to answer some questions. There's examples of documentation. There's no one way to plan this. So feel free to think outside the box and look at other ways of planning the meeting and scheduling it. We are exploring, like I said, the hybrid streaming options. The board approved to create an ad hoc committee for annual meeting alternatives or alternative annual meetings. No, we're not going to be inviting 9 Inch Nails or any other groups. It's mostly for different ways of thinking about presenting the annual meeting. So Nori's chairing that. They've already kickstarted. And for example, she had talked about, I believe it was Tracy, who attended a conference that group meets 1 year in person and then 1 year virtually. And the virtual meeting, the funds that they earn from the virtual meeting help pay and offset the costs for the in-person meeting the next year. So we're just looking at different ways that we can not necessarily shake things up, but look at sustainable ways of continuing providing this annual meeting to our members. Because as I said a while ago, we do not have nobody has submitted a site proposal for 2024. So it might just be that we are virtual that year because we don't have any physical space to host at this time. Hopefully this forum has alleviated some fears or answered some questions. And we would love for somebody to propose for 2024. But again, if not, we will more than likely have to go virtual in order to provide that year. And thanks to Ed's year, 2021, we've done virtual before, and there's so many more options for us available due to what we've had to do for the last 2 years from the pandemic. So there are other technology options available out there. And Nori's group is gonna, help research and look for those and see what else we can offer in the future. And then, yes, so PDC, here are all the emails. President, that's me. Program, that's Nori and who's heading the program committee. And then the PDC, the Professional Development Committee, who organizes and plans for workshops throughout the year, but also the pre-conference workshops for the annual meeting. Do any of the panelists have anything that they would like to chime in about? I'd like to leave at least 10 minutes for Q&A. I see there's 28 things in the chat. Again, someone please help me facilitate.
They were sending the email for the PDC, and then they said when you submit your proposal, each presenter can select whether they will be on site or virtual for the 2023 conference, since it's hybrid.
Yeah, I imagine, and maybe Nori can speak to that, but I imagine the form for submitting is very different than it has been in the past since it is hybrid.
I will just note I betrayed you all and attended MARAC about a month ago, but they did finish my archives bingo card. And they were hybrid, and I was moderating a panel that had both in-person and streamed presenters. But what they did, the people that presented remotely recorded their
Ah,
presentation, and then they were on the telephone held up to a mic for the Q&A, and it wound up working out great. So
no owls.
there are, yeah.
No, but seriously though, I'm really looking forward to those owls. If you Google the owls for hybrid streaming and take a look, they're really cool. And I think we're going to be using them this year. I'm still not sure, but anyway, that seems like a really low key way of also streaming and doing hybrid. Thank you, Ed. But Nori, did you want to chime in about the ad hoc committee at all?
Nori had to leave early.
Oh, she left. Oh no.
Just a couple minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure she will be reporting about that in the future. So keep an eye out for the board meeting minutes for future news about what that committee, the ad hoc committee, is doing and what they figure out. Any other panelist input?
It actually is. I was joking about this earlier. Although sometimes afterwards you say, I'm never going to do that again. It is a lot of fun.
I will say, years ago, within the last, 2007 or 8, prior to that, the conference was a day and a half. We had workshops on Thursday, all day Friday, Saturday morning. The board changed it to 2 days. It's like, if we're traveling this much, why don't we go Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning? We've been doing Saturday morning for decades because, in the old days, people didn't necessarily get paid to go to conferences. You had to take a vacation day. So, we've been doing it this way for 50 years. Maybe it needs to change. Maybe, we need to not do Saturday mornings and do Thursday or Friday or whatever it is. I mean, we're looking at virtual. We can look at shorter or longer conferences. If people want to do something, don't let the format change you or make you not speak up and say, well, what about this? Or have we thought about that? Or can we do it this way? Because this will work for Lakeland, Florida.
Yeah, I think for Houston, we decided not to do, and Tracy will probably be able to chime in too about that, but well, for San Antonio, we made sure that the room block extended to Sunday because we figured people, it hadn't been in San Antonio for a long time. The fact that we were actually being able to have a reception at the Alamo. I think it was also around the 300th anniversary of the city. There was a lot going on, so we figured people would probably bring their families if they could, and would take advantage of the hotel room block if it was extended. So we were able to do that this past year. We decided to not have Saturday sessions. And start the business meeting a little later. People tend to go out on Friday nights and enjoy themselves after the reception, and then getting up for an 8 o'clock morning business meeting and then Slotto, and then running to a session afterwards. We just thought that perhaps people might want to, and what we've noticed also is that people travel immediately after, that morning. So they don't often meet the session. They don't make the sessions. And it seems kind of, I don't know, not horrible, but it seems like a disservice to have people chosen to present on a Saturday morning when not everybody's going to be there to attend. So I know I've been selected to speak at a session on a Saturday morning and then be like, oh, there's no one here, sad face. But anyway, no, I mean, it's we just thought we would do that also. So that's why we tried to squeeze everything into Thursday and Friday.
I think that also depends on if the hosting location, you have to think about, so for example, flying into Baton Rouge, for most people is going to involve 2 flights. Whereas flying into Dallas or Houston might be a single flight for most people. So they may be able to travel later in the day. Just a thought. Oh, now I'm sorry. I'm going to throw another thought out there. One of the neat things that I liked from our virtual one were the number of repository tours done virtually. And we saved all those videos. And that was the most watched thing from our virtual conference. And I actually still use them in classes now because they were great and they were funny. And some of them were tours of places that I don't get to see, even though I'm local. So repository tours don't have to be in person.
They were successful virtually, so yeah, that's also an option. Especially if you're going to be having a hybrid meeting, you want people who are attending virtually to be able to attend something. Are there any other questions? And yes, Jonathan, I did say in the chat that we are, when we looked at the owls and started talking to Portia about that earlier this year, I did talk to a few leaders about perhaps proposing that to the board about purchasing 3 of them. And then that way they can be shipped to the next LAC each year from year to year so that people can incorporate that into streaming so that we can do that. But again, we're going to have to create some documentation around that if approved. So we know which committee is hosting those or is in how the transfer of owls happens after each event. So that will be some future documentation. The annual meeting guide needs to be, as I was reading the annual meeting guide, which shout out to Jen, I believe if I remember memory serves, Jen was the person who spearheaded providing putting that documentation together, which is amazing. If you want to speak to that at all. But it does need to be revised.
Policy and procedures. What can I say? It's honestly great fun. But yeah, that was something that we put together in 2016 because it was a feeling of reinventing the wheel every year because, you know, there's a lot of just things we don't know about as not being event planners. So I hope that that document is living on and, you know, evolving and still being useful to everyone. So that's just a working thing. And like you said, the timeline was just so people would have an idea. And it's not like anything's due or anyone's going to come and be the LAC police and tell you you're in trouble. So that's a guidance document for sure.
I found that a lot of the freakouts that happened were self-imposed. Like it was my own expectations or me thinking that I was doing certain things. So I think when you're running those, there's nobody breathing down your neck. So it's your time and project management skills that are at play. So be kind to yourself as well when you're planning.
And I suspect that as a representative of the 2023 LAC, that we will be contributing significantly to our successes and our challenges that we will have with this hybrid meeting. And I very much appreciate hearing that news. We actually have in half an hour our LAC meets to talk about a few things. So I will look forward to reporting that we're heading towards a green light of the society of the organization purchasing the owls, which is great. And I would just make another little tiny plug for there's the latest version of these owls. You can purchase additional boundary mics, which will definitely help with picking up audio from the rooms. So I would just want to make a little plug for some of the specifics if that's at all possible. But that's really great news. We're happy to hear that. Yeah,
we use them at work and they're really awesome. And I'd only seen like online demos of them. I'd never seen an in-person demo. So to be in a room and just see that little dude in the middle, just like swiveling around and doing his thing, and then seeing it up on the screen, and it has its own little window, like each of you have right now, and you can see the entire room in a panoramic view, and then you can see panelists like and other people in like 2 or 3 windows, which I think you can set up how you want it to present. But it's a really awesome piece of technology. So I'm really hoping that we are able to fund 3 of those and get board approval for them.
Awesome, yeah. And just so everyone else is aware too, because this is a new kind of technology, Our technology committee or crew is looking at getting students and compensating students to basically be the moderators of each of the concurrent sessions for the Zoom, for the OWL technology. We'll be doing trainings well in advance of the meeting. We'll be anticipating all of the issues so that we can be as prepared as possible. And if we do need to go a little low tech and use a phone and against a microphone, then we will. But I'm hoping that we're going to have plenty of time to get this as good as possible. But we definitely felt like an important item in the budget to compensate our students who will be helping with that management of that technology.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like we've lost a lot of people. It looks like a board meeting right now.
Well, Jonathan, I would also suggest, anybody you can give a free student admission to. Nobody on the board is going to yell at you, especially if they don't know. I use student help, and it was like, nope, you're in for free. So
yeah, that's definitely one of the perks for those students as well.
Yeah, that's a lat call, totally. I mean, the board doesn't need to approve that or anything. Well, I think that's it. I'm not sure if there are any questions from who we have left over, but if there are a few leaders here, so I will say, please, by all means, promote 2024 and see if anybody would like to host it. Not that I'm opposed to a virtual meeting, but especially after we've already done one before, and then looking at, the hybrid experiment that's happening this year, we will have, I think, more options available to us for a virtual meeting. But again, yes, please contact the site selection committee, who is host. I think it's Heather. I'm trying to remember her last name. Oh my gosh. Anyway, yes, site selection committee. Or
it's Heather Kushnerick.
Thank you, Robert.
Yes.
But yes, anybody to host would be great. Hi, but thank you for coming. Thank you, panelists, for joining me today. Thank you, Amanda, also for chiming in and bringing your insight. So if anybody, and thank you, Jonathan, also for bringing us some info about 2023. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email. Yeah, I think that's it.